Well, thanks everybody, and welcome to VMworld. This is the first session after the keynote, so excited to have this opportunity to share with you today. So my name's Kurt Milne. I'm the Director of Cloud Ops Programs at VMware, and I'm going to be presenting with Venkat Gopalakrishnan. Sorry about that. He's the Director of IT Ops, and so Venkat is a unique character because he has product expertise and he runs IT operations. So he's got a lot to share with us today. So this is a story or a session about VMware using our own products and some of the things that we've learned from this experience. And specifically, this is to summarize, Venkat runs a team of what we call AppOps engineers, and they're responsible for standing up dev test environments for 600 developers and across the SDLC lifecycle. So this isn't the software factory where we develop, vSphere 5.5. This is the IT organization within VMware. So like you, they support Oracle, SaaS applications, tools that the IT organization uses. So what we found was that we were using a manual process to deploy these dev test instances. So the process was complicated. We're standing up something like a full working application of Oracle ERP with web portals. The processes tended to be slow and had inconsistency quality coming out the other end. And that really impacted the efficiency of the 600 or so developers that were waiting for and using these instances to do their work. So we looked at options to fix the problem. One was to try to fix what we call a human middleware, which is a lot of the people doing manual work, multiple steps across a long process. The other option was basically to replace and automate that process entirely using private cloud and the software control of the underlying network, compute, and storage resources. So we chose to replace and automate and had some pretty significant benefits. We went from an average of 4-week cycle time down to 36 hours, and we're on track to achieving 24 hours for full provisioning and test. We increased the productivity of the 600 developers by about 20%. So if you do the math, that's like hiring over 100 people for free. And we eliminated one source, a major source of development project schedule risk. And we also reduced our CapEx and OpEx by about $6 million a year. So the net was we set out to improve agility, and as a result, we improved service quality and reduced costs as well. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit this morning about more details about the challenge, the options, and what we did. And then Venkat's going to pick it up and really talk about the changes that we had to make to the people, to the process, to the organization, to governance, really a lot of the soft issues, which tend to be the hard issues that go along with the new tools and capabilities that we deployed. So Venkat runs what we call the AppOps team. They support our developers and the folks that are responsible for our enterprise applications. We call it AppOps instead of DevOps because they're really responsible for standing up pre-production instances. And when you look at the amount of work of the number of projects that we have going simultaneously, we tend to have about 8 times as many pre-production VMs in the SDLC as we do in the production environment. So about 4,000 VMs in pre-production and 500 in production. And so we've got a team of folks that's specifically focused on standing up and supporting those pre-production environments. So there's a lot of talk right now about using public clouds to do dev and test work with the idea of then using that lower cost, more agile infrastructure and then rolling that back on-premise for production. But what a lot of folks find is that there are API issues and compatibility issues that make it hard to move a dev test environment from a public cloud back into an on-premise environment. So our approach instead was to use a private cloud that closely matches our production environment so that we move through the different stages of the SDLC and into production. We don't have those compatibility issues. So we have, from the journey slides you saw this morning, we made a decision a couple of years ago to really aggressively go after delivering IT as a service. That was a decision that was made at the executive level. And the way we're doing that is by moving traditional, virtual infrastructure workloads into our private cloud as a way to increase agility and better meet the needs of VMware as a business. So the process, as I mentioned, it's complicated. Well, first of all, the SDLC lifecycle, we have multiple points where the developers want a fresh instance so that they can do their development work. And the process that we use to provision those working instances tends to be about 20 major steps. I mean, this is probably familiar to a lot of you who do this kind of work. Provisioning the VM is one of many steps and is one of the easier and shorter time steps that is involved in that work. We tend to do this or need this about for 30 to 50 projects a year, and actually standing up this instance takes about a month. And so when you look at the delays that are caused to developers as they wait for these instances, it's really quite disruptive. So from the customer view, customer being the developers within the enterprise application group, that having to stop work and wait for an instance, it's hard to figure out what to do with 250 developers who are working on a major project. So we have switching costs, they get distracted with other things. When Venkat's team gets busy, then when a developer calls and requests an instance, the email back is, well, let's calendar a project scheduling meeting. That's the first response back from his team. Let's get a calendar, a meeting so we can look at when we can work your request into our backlog. And so we're basically saying no to our customer often. And then as a result of this being hard to get a hold of a dev test instance, they tend to share. So one group will hold on to an instance, and when they're done, another group will wait and pick it up. So if the first group's project is late, then we all of a sudden have this domino cascading effect of late projects. And then finally, because this is a manual process, this involves 5 different teams that are globally distributed, both infrastructure teams and application experts, working around vacations and sick days and then having different skill sets. I mean, the output of this process, even though we've got a well-defined run book on how to stand up an Oracle instance, we tend to have variability in the quality of what comes out the other end. So about late last year, we had a meeting, a feedback meeting with the developers, and we heard the same complaints over and over. I can't develop, I'm waiting. I can't test, I'm waiting. The project managers are complaining because it's making their projects late. How many development projects are over schedule or over budget, right? I mean, that's a pretty common problem. And then the business managers are we're waiting for this new capability to roll into production so we can run our business. So basically we said, let's fix this problem. So let's think like a process engineer for a minute, right? So Edward Deming, who's kind of the grandfather of manufacturing reform in the last century, he had this famous quote, it's not enough to do your best, you have to know what to do and then do your best. So the issue wasn't that Venkat's team didn't have the skills or the motivation or the desire to go do a good job, it's that they were working within a system that was a problem. So if you look at that system from a theory of constraints view, how many of you are familiar with Eli Goldratt and the book, The Theory of Constraints? It's basically the idea is that every process has a weak link. And so you identify that constraint, and then you optimize everything around that constraint. So I don't know if you've heard in the DevOps community about Kanban and using pull systems to try to optimize. Well, if we've got 20-some people that are constraining 600 people, then maybe optimizing around that constraint isn't the right answer. Maybe we go eliminate the constraint. So the other way to look at it is using lean ideas, where we look for the Japanese term is muda, which is waste. So you look for the different kinds of waste and eliminate the cause of those wastes as a way to optimize that. And what we found when we did a detailed analysis is that the waiting was the biggest waste. That it wasn't a person executing a task that was causing the process to be slow. It was all of the scheduling of the people and the dependencies and things having to happen in a particular order, 5 different siloed groups that were busy with other priorities. So it was really, that's why we coined the term human middleware to describe this process for using to deploy these instances. So we were basically faced with two fundamentally different choices. One was to try to fix this human middleware problem that was working on kind of a traditional virtual server infrastructure. And the other choice was to try to just replace and automate this end-to-end on a private cloud on an SDDC architecture. So with software control of the resources, we could do things in the private cloud that we couldn't do in the server virtualization environment. So we chose the second option was let's just, instead of trying to fix the process, let's just replace it and automate it. So one of the factors that impacted our decision to pick that second choice was that we had a private cloud. So about a year ago, we launched what we call internally Project OneCloud, which is our internal deployment of vCloud as infrastructure as a service, provides basic IaaS functionality on our SDDC architecture. What we found is that within a year, we've gone from 0 to 40,000 VMs in our private cloud environment. We have 9 different tenants now using this. So when you go to Hands-On Labs here at VMworld, that's in our private cloud. If you call Global Customer Service and Support and they stand up a version of your environment, that's in the private cloud. So we really had kind of explosive growth. And I talked about how we made a conscious decision to execute an IT as a service strategy. So the way we're operationalizing that strategy is to basically move things from our traditional virtual server environment into the private cloud as a way to gain agility and flexibility. So we made the decision that we thought that the private cloud environment was suitable for all of these dev test SDLC activities. So we made that decision, we figure out how to operationalize that decision, then we start looking at some of the factors or requirements for that team as we go into that new environment. So one is that we've got a new operating model. So all of a sudden, part of IT is now a cloud service provider, and other parts of IT are now cloud service consumers. And so we've got all of a sudden a shift in different jobs, and we've had to move people organizationally, and Venkat will talk about some of that. But conceptually, we've got a team of folks that are now responsible for what we call infrastructure operations. So these are the cloud infrastructure admins. They're responsible for delivering infrastructure to certain SLAs. And we've got tenant operations, which are those folks responsible for onboarding new tenants, making sure the SLAs are clearly defined, identifying what goes in the service catalog, that's the portal into the infrastructure as a service. And then we have what we call application ops, which is Venskat's team. Just because we've got a cloud doesn't mean that operations goes away. You still have to install and manage and monitor and upgrade the applications and the middleware that go on top of that private cloud environment. So this is a new thing for us internally. And if you're going down this path, this is going to be something that you're going to need to figure out. And we're still figuring this out. We still have conversations on a weekly basis about what's in tenant ops versus what's in application ops. We've got service catalogs at different places. Where can we consolidate the service offerings into one catalog versus having multiple? I mean, this is a work in progress. And let me just take a minute to talk about what drives that what we call AppOps or application ops requirement. So we're standing up a full working instance of Oracle. So it's got load balancers, it's got a web tier for the portal apps, we're punching through the firewall, we've got web servers. I mean, this is a complex environment. I mean, how many of you have stood up manually this kind of environment? It's a lot of work, it's a lot of steps. And then once it's in place running, managing that so it continues to run is a lot of work as well. So that's what one tenant, Venkat's doing, is doing in the private cloud. We have other tenants, like when you get a demo from a sales engineer, he stands up an environment in a private cloud. Well, the operational requirements for provisioning a VM and some data is different. It's not as sophisticated. The instance doesn't live as long. So the point is that the application operations requirements for this complex environment are different than another tenant who's using the same cloud. And the cloud automation and management requirements are different. Again, standing up a full working instance of Oracle and managing that is different than just provisioning a VM image. And so we've started to kind of standardize on the idea of having vCloud suite to provide the cloud automation and management at the infrastructure as a service layer, and then also installing vCloud suite and using different capabilities in each of the tenant environments. So we really start to have that, there are cloud providers and cloud consumers within the IT organization. So that just kind of sets up our thinking around, there's really two goals that we set out to we've turned strategy into operationalizing that, and now we're down to specific project goals. So one was to automate this process end-to-end, 24-hour cycle time goal. So 18 hours, 16 hours for provisioning, and about 8 hours for automated testing. And then the other was to transition all of the workloads out of the traditional virtual server environment into the cloud. And I use the word transition instead of move because we weren't really moving workloads. When those development instances were done, when the developers were done with those instances, we're basically turning them off in the previous environment. And when they need a new one, we're turning it on through this automated workflow in the cloud environment. So we're never actually moving anything from one place to another. So the point there, and I said this before, but there's really a key dependency here, is that you can't do what we're doing now in the traditional kind of server virtual environment. You really need the kind of the private cloud, SDLC, software control of all the infrastructure resources in order to do this level of automation. So last slide before I hand it over to Venkat. So we did project chunking. I think chunking is the right term, right? We broke this down into small pieces. We put this project into a two-phase program. So the first phase was really focused on building the cloud automation and management capabilities that we need as a tenant, moving about 2,800 or transitioning 2,800 VMs that are related to the dev, tests, and user acceptance testing stages of our SDLC. So we blueprinted about 80 application components that are used in about 16 different instances that are now in the service catalog. And the key milestone, first of all, we started this in about 8 months ago. So the first key milestone was we did our first fully automated provisioning after about 4 months of work. And Venkat will talk about how we continue to improve the cycle time by making improvements. Then the second phase is to really focus on the load test and staging stages of the SDLC. We're going to expand our service profiles so that we can have variable cost for storage and network across those stages. We'll add kind of financial transformation, and we're going to go to a full chargeback model and usage-based pricing for these services. So we'll, instead of being responsible for procuring infrastructure as part of the applications team and then maintaining that infrastructure, we'll go to a full cost pass-through model where we're basically passing the cost of the cloud service to the development project with some markup for the AppOps work that goes on top of that. And then we're going to continue to add some advanced management, analytics and performance management as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Venkat. Venkat is going to talk about the kind of the operations transformation that was needed to make this all work.
Thank you, Kurt. The kind of problems that we face within VMware IT are very similar to what you face in your companies. It is just the magnitude of the problem that changes depending on the infrastructure that you run, the number of applications that you have, or the services that you provide. Business today wants IT to be much more agile. They want IT operations to be very efficient and provide services at a much faster speed. We have solved some of these problems at VMware IT. My name is Venkat Gopalakrishnan. I am the Program Director for VMware IT's Software-Defined Data Center project. I've been with VMware for about 6 years, and I came from the applications team. So I was a customer, internal customer for the operations team and was facing some of the problems that we are trying to solve today. There are three areas that we addressed in this transformation journey. If I could focus your attention to the bottom of the graphic, we moved all our development and test, compute and storage to our internal private cloud. Then on top of that, we built a cloud automation and management solution. So there is a specific session that my colleague is doing, I think on Wednesday, on the architecture and technology behind the cloud automation solution. Beyond these two areas, what we normally overlook in IT operations is the transformation and the operational aspects: process, people, and governance. All these three areas put together has given us the agility, and we have made significant improvement in, in provisioning, development, and test instances. As Kurt mentioned, until late last year, we used to provision these instances in about 4 weeks. That was an average time, and we used to take anywhere up to 6 weeks to provision an SDLC instance. Today, that time has come down to 36 hours, from weeks to hours. And our goal by the end of the year is 24 hours. So from a request to delivering an instance to the internal customer or a developer, our goal is to do that in 24 hours. That's a significant goal, and we have no doubt we will achieve by the end of the year. Kurt spoke about the human middleware problem. Now I want to see the same problem from an inside-out view. So from an IT point of view, we typically work in silos. There is handoffs between teams. You have an infrastructure team who provisions storage and the infrastructure side, then which gets handed off to a DBA or an admin who will do their work, maybe bringing up the OS, bringing up the application. So there is handoffs between multiple teams. That's the traditional way we have been operating. Issues with that: ticketing systems are typically used for handoffs, so that becomes inefficiency. And you are creating silos of information. There is very little coordination between these teams. The end result, it's slow and error prone, many manual steps. So in the downstream process, if there is an issue found, a ticket is normally created and handed off to the team up front. So this causes inefficiency, human error. A lot of things are not automated. They are all in the form of runbooks, written documentation, or in somebody's head to know how to configure an instance. How do you make different applications talk to each other? IT, as all we know, are global today, and then there's capacity constraints. We have certain, in VMware, we have multiple locations across the globe where IT resources are available, and certain skills are available only in certain locations. So we had to work around global holidays, time offs. So things get elongated. Something that can be done in weeks take maybe many weeks. So this has been the traditional problem that we have faced over several years. So we sat across the table and found, okay, how do we solve this problem? What are the different processes that go into provisioning an instance? Just a representation of some of the critical steps that we take in provisioning an instance. So each step could take anywhere between few days to few weeks. For example, procuring infrastructure, standing up the VMs could take anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. Bringing up the database, maybe a couple of days. Configuring servers, again, couple of days. QA testing, it could take maybe days depending on the issues you find in your environmental or functional testing, or it could take weeks depending on the issues. Maybe there is an issue and it has to be debugged. Someone will have to go and do a transaction and see whether it's working. So the process itself, the important steps to provision an instance itself was taking anywhere between few days to weeks. Then we looked at, okay, what is taking time? What are the teams actually doing in each of these steps? We kind of did a process breakdown and found that it was the wait time that was causing the problem rather than the actual task time. It's pretty simple to say, but that's what was causing this 4 or 5 weeks to provision an instance. Teams were handing over tasks from one place to another, so they were just waiting. You might argue, well, maybe a DBA, you can assign something else to him or her while waiting for the task to come, but that's really not possible. This is not like an assembly line where you can just give work to people. Sometimes you have to allocate resources for certain tasks. So the wait time was much, much higher than the task time. So what did we do here? Initially, we thought, okay, let's try and automate the individual tasks. Maybe we will automate the task of configuring a server. But that did not help us a lot. All you're eliminating is you're automating or reducing the task time, but the wait time still remains. So what we did was took a holistic approach and said, the only way to do this is move our compute and storage infrastructure to our private cloud and automate the end-to-end provisioning process. What did it do to us? 3 important steps simply vanished. So the steps of procuring and building the infrastructure, storage, just vanished. And if you remember, those were the ones that was taking the longest lead time, up to 4 weeks for us to set it up. So the remaining tasks are simply configuring an instance. And we worked on the cloud automation and management solution, which helped us automate the end-to-end provisioning task. So we went to our internal private cloud, which now gives the compute and the storage as a service for us, and all the provisioning tasks are automated end-to-end. What it did to us is eliminated the entire wait time and also eliminated a lot of manual work. So this has been a huge win for us. Looking at this from a different angle, what you see in the top is the traditional way of provisioning development and test instances. The way it used to work at VMware is based on some forecast, working with the project managers. We will procure the storage and compute and stand it up. Many times, we wait for the service request to come from the project manager or a developer. What happens after the service request comes is like what Kurt mentioned. Somebody in operations team would actually set up a meeting to find out what the customer or the internal developer really wants. Today, in 24 hours, we are going to provision the instance. So that's a huge shift. 24 hours meeting to 24 hours you are actually delivering the service. That has been our journey so far. So in the traditional way, once the request comes in, we used to start the provisioning process, and these were all done using runbooks, documented Word documents. Someone would take and go line by line and start configuring the instance. Issues will happen at any stage, whether it is in QA or, maybe a DBA finds an issue or an admin finds an issue. Then all we do is go and update the runbook. And next time, maybe months or weeks later, if another instance is being provisioned, you could find another issue. So go update the runbook. This was like an inefficient process that was taking 4 weeks. Focusing on the bottom portion, that's the new software-defined data center process that we are using. A lot of the work is moved up front. Imagine our provisioning process is starting at the 50th yard line. You're already halfway into your game. We have taken the entire standard development and test instance, created a service catalog. So as a developer or an internal customer, they can pick and choose and say, I need these services in this SDLC instance. The entire process is blueprinted, so no more runbooks. Runbooks are now translated into blueprint policies. An operations team over the past 6 months, we have run the blueprint several times to make sure it can be consistently and in a predictable manner provisioned to the developers. So once the service request comes in, all we do is deploy the blueprints, and today in 36 hours, we have been successful in delivering a development or a test instance. As you can see, it has taken less effort and time for us to convert the runbook into blueprints than it took to run the runbook itself. Very important. And this converting all the runbooks into blueprints is a one-time effort, and with a very little ongoing maintenance afterwards. Now, in the initial slide, I spoke about the 3 operational transformation areas: process, people, and governance. Let me deep dive into details on what we did internally in these 3 areas to be successful in our journey. There were challenges. It was not very straightforward when we started this. This project was initiated late last year, and the first instance using SDDC was provided in the month of April. So it took us about 4 months to perfect this process and deliver a good standing instance. The first time we delivered this instance, it took us 172 hours. Again, it was a huge improvement from 4 weeks to 172 hours, but we were nowhere close to the goal that was given to us of 24 hours. There were several challenges we faced. So what happens? Let me ask you, what happens when IT becomes efficient? Demand increases. So when we were doing this in 4 weeks, project managers and developers were a little bit hesitant to go to IT operations and ask, for instance, if they want to try out some innovative stuff. Let's say a developer has some innovative idea and wanted to try it out. They were not willing to come to operations and ask for an instance because they know it's going to take 4 hours. Now, we brought that 4 weeks to a couple of days, so the demand increased. So I had a developer who came to us and said, I want to try out this software upgrade. Can I have an instance for that? Yeah, we accepted. So to be nice to everyone, now we started accepting more and more instance requests while we were still working on making this whole process perfect. So the demand was increasing, and we were not concentrating on making the blueprint perfect. We were not concentrating on training the teams across the globe. So there were mistakes done. So those challenges we did overcome, took some specific actions. So as I said, the first instance took 172 hours. Now, we had to make some specific improvements. Number one, it's a kind of the way IT traditionally thinks, right? Your DBA or admin, when they find a problem, the thought process is, okay, let me do the root cause analysis, find out what the issue is, take corrective actions. So now with automation and software-defined data center, that thinking had to change. We said there is no point in trying to repair a mistake, rather simply re-provision. So if certain application goes bad during the provisioning process, if something fails, instead of today we don't spend time in debugging that issue. We simply redeploy that blueprint. That is much faster than trying to spend. But of course, after the instance is stood up, we kind of look at what issues we found and do a debrief later on. So putting that process in place, plus we cross-trained teams. The initial instances were done primarily in our Palo Alto location. Again, automation is very different from doing things manually. When you push the button and say, start provisioning this instance, it doesn't stop. So someone will have to continuously monitor. So when you start looking at this kind of an operation, it was important for us to cross-train teams across the globe. So you have a certain skill set in one location, try to cross-train team in other locations so they can kind of, pair up and monitor until the instance is deployed. We took two of those specific actions, and that brought our deployment time from 172 hours down to 100 hours. And that was not enough. We were still not closer to the goal. Then we took actions to improve our blueprint quality. So again, the blueprints have to be translated from our run book. It required good shell scripting skills. So we deployed the top skills in our team to create blueprints, and that helped us a lot. Plus, we concentrated on improving our testing cycles, both environmental testing and functional testing. We invested in automating that process. That used to initially in the traditional method, that used to take almost a week to 2 weeks. Now we are down to about 12 hours. The entire functional QA has been automated now. So that helped us to reduce the deployment hours down to about 60. You will also see there is a little bit of variability. A couple of instances, one instance was at 60 hours, another one took about 66 hours, and that's okay. That's acceptable, and that's okay. The reason is your development and test instance is a copy of your production. So there is always production releases going on. So those changes into production have to be redeployed and then provisioned into the development and test instances. So there could be some variability in the timing. The biggest change that we got, if you look at the last one that we deployed in the first week of August, was we had the second release of our automation solution. That helped us a lot. So initially, the initial version we had in the automation solution was there could be only one application deployed at any point in time. Then we went into parallel. So you could have your Oracle or SAP, in our case it's Oracle, or Oracle application, plus our portals all being deployed at the same time. So that helped us to reduce the number of hours that it took to deploy an instance by almost 20 hours. So today, the last instance that we deployed is right about 36 hours. To reach our goal of 24 hours by the end of the year, we have two important areas we are focusing. We are focusing on more automation. There are still some manual steps that will be automated. And also we are going to improve our QA testing process. So those two will take us to 24 hours by the end of the year. So the results have been pretty impressive. From 4 weeks to 36 hours, that's a huge and a significant gain for us. We have streamlined our demand intake process. We have basically created bandwidth where we can provision at least one instance per week. So when we started this in deploying the first instance, it was in April. So between April and August, we have provided about 15 instances to our project and development team. That was something that we have never seen in VMware. It used to take probably a year to provide that many instances. So that's a significant improvement we have done. And as you walk out, some of the things that I want to take you away is look at the end-to-end process, not just focus on one single step. And that has not given us the efficiency improvement, but end-to-end process automation is what has helped us. Now, looking at the people transformation aspect, we have seen this automobile industries. Traditionally, it was people who were tightening the nuts and bolts of cars. Today, you don't see people. It's the robots that are building the cars. So the question is, what happened to people? Did they just vanish? The answer is no. The same human beings who are tightening the nuts and bolts are the ones who are building those robots. It's the transformation, and that is exactly what happened at VMware. So we had DBAs and administrators who are manually configuring, and those are the same people who are building the automation. So it's a huge people transformation. Until last year, when we were provisioning this instance in the traditional way, we had about 27 engineers doing that work. At the end of the journey, when we complete this, we will have just 5 engineers responsible for provisioning, development, and test instances. So what happened to those 22 people? A lot of them now work for the automation team, building automation in our process. A big portion of them have become SMEs. They are the ones who manage the blueprints. They are the ones who update the blueprints whenever there's a production release. So people have moved into higher value-added skills. That's really important. Several years ago, I did not enjoy installing ERP applications. That was a boring, difficult work. Same with people today. People wanted to do value-added work. They want to be working on the latest and greatest technology, and that's exactly what happened to VMware's operations team. Today, at the push of a button, an application administrator can deploy a complete SDLC instance end-to-end without depending on any other skill set. That's very important. There is no dependency. Going back to the human middleware problem, there is no handoff. There is no handoff required. One single person can deploy an end-to-end instance. Very important for our journey. Again, we also got a lot of our resources certified in vCloud products and several other VMware products. So that was also part of the whole improvement plan. All of you must be familiar with this, filling up forms. Tell me your requirements, and you fill up forms after forms. What is your specifications? These are all gone. All these are now translated into something called service catalog. It's all catalog, services defined, and if you're a customer, internal customer, developer, or a project manager, can pick and choose, and we deploy the instance for them. So this whole manual work of filling out forms are gone. Again, impressive results we have got. Personally, I would say my team is all very pumped up in doing this. They are working on the latest and greatest technology. A lot of them have got retrained. They have got certified. The main thing is they are working on high value-added skill set. That's been the key driver for them. Governance, very important, and we are all in IT, we're all used to governance. There are 2 areas that I would like to discuss regarding governance. One is the blueprint management and governance, and second is the financial governance. What we did was, we created a core team of SMEs to manage the blueprints. Their role is to update them, work with the developers, and make sure any production changes, any production releases are incorporated in the blueprint. So that is their key role. So governing blueprint, documenting them has been really important. The second area is the financial governance. IT is used to carrying capital expenditures all the time. So you deploy your infrastructure. The capex cost is built into IT budget. We carry it for 3 or 5 years, depending on the depreciation. Now, with infrastructure being purchased as a service from our internal private cloud, we carry no more capex. Everything has become operating expenditure for us. So our finance team loves it. That's what we want. So that's an important piece, and then if you're thinking about going into this journey, start discussing with your finance partner well ahead and make sure there is clear alignment. Where does this lead to us? VMware IT wants to be in the IT as a service operating model. So this has helped us to take one additional step into the journey. We are not yet there, but we will soon be there. So we have our service catalog defined, we have our services defined, we have our SLAs, plus we have our financial model. So sometime next year, we should be charging back the instance cost, the per instance cost to either our project team or our business, whoever is asking. We have our cost calculator, but we are not yet charging back. So sometime next year, we should be doing that. So just a screenshot of the blueprint. So I was talking about no more runbooks. Everything has now been translated into blueprint. So you will see this more in detail when you go into the technical session on Wednesday. Again, real-time results. We have created ourselves what is called as disposable infrastructure. So you build up this instance, create the instance, project is complete, we dispose it off. So our private cloud can give away that the compute and storage to some other team. So IT might not need it. So that's an important win for us in this journey. And I was telling you, we have done about 15 instances in about 4 months. I wanted to share some impressive results we have got. These are real-time results from our project. Provisioning time reduced by 95%, and it will go up when we cut down the time to 24 hours. 4 weeks to 36 hours down to 24 hours. That's a huge win. Developer productivity up 20%. So we have about 600 developers, 20%. It's like getting 100 more developers free. Impressive results. IT budget reduction, $6 million, $1.5 million in about operating costs and $4.5 million in infrastructure costs. Above all, what makes me feel good is I'm able to say yes to customer requests. Today, when somebody asks for an instance, we said, yes, we can provision 24 hours or 36 hours. That's a huge win for me personally in the operations team. The bottom line is, agility is self-sustaining. Before I open it for Q&A, I want to, kind of take a final takeaways for you. Share the results. When you start a journey like this, share the results and share what you're going to do with your developers. They are your customers, so it's important for them to be joined at the hip with the operations team in this journey. As I said, the blueprint, the SMEs will have to work very closely with the developers. Training is key. Blueprint management is a key SME role today. So they will have to become experts in this area. Take the holistic approach of looking at the automation process. Individual tasks is not going to give you the efficiency that you are looking for. Finally, software-defined data center provides greater flexibility, which is not possible with just simple server virtualization. We have created a complete software control infrastructure in this last 4 months. So with that, I'd like you to point to some of the sessions that are coming up. There's a technical session on software-defined data center that's on Wednesday, 3:30 to 4:30. That's done by my colleague Thirumalesh Reddy. That will deep dive into what the automation and its architecture. We also have, if you go to VMware.com, there are a few white papers out there. Encourage you to visit. Now let me bring back Kurt and we'll open up for Q&A. Thank you.
And one other session I wanted to point out, so Paul Chapman, who's our VP of Infrastructure and Operations, is on a panel tomorrow, Wednesday, talking about how IT can become a service broker. So you'll have more understanding of how we've gone through this transformation from Paul as well. So we've got a couple microphones. We've got somebody up first.
Venkat, you mentioned how great it is to have the lines of business be able to use OpEx instead of CapEx. But how did you guys stand up the original infrastructure to be able to support the OpEx? Where'd you get that CapEx from, and how much was it, and how did you determine how much space you would need?
So that's what. So in the traditional method, when a request comes in, we definitely sit with the project manager or the customer to find out what they need, kind of the detailed specification. And then we used to estimate how much of hardware and how many resources are required to stand up that instance. That's how we had a standard template. Per VM cost, then we know for this kind of instances how many VMs are required, how many resources are needed. Then we used to arrive at a CapEx. And that used to be IT CapEx cost. Now that has changed with this because we don't have to procure hardware. Now it's a service for us. And that cost is now changed to operating expenses.
I guess my question is, how did you get to that point? You know, now that it's an OpEx instead of CapEx for the line of business, how did you create the software-defined data center to begin with? You must have, did you, I guess, estimate over time how many you would need resident at any given time and then get the business to sign off on the original OpEx to buy that hardware you would need?
Yeah. We do some estimation. We sit with, so we are one of the tenants for our private cloud. So we sit with them and then do some estimation on what it's going to cost. As I said, we haven't yet gone into charging the business for this. So, but we will soon. As we go into IT as a service and a chargeback model, we will start moving into that direction. But right now, we are still keeping it within IT, but we will go into the direction soon.
Thank you.
And the other part of that is, so we've got multiple data centers, but the private cloud is in a data center. A lot of the tenants' workloads that are now in that private cloud were previously in the same data center, but not all of them. And one thing that conceptually changed is we had multiple groups that were responsible for managing infrastructure. Even though we're all one company, I mean, that's pretty common. So we had multiple groups that were responsible for the infrastructure. Now we got one group that's responsible for that infrastructure as a service. And so there are some economies of scale. So there's fewer people with redundant responsibilities. So we did get some benefit that way. But at the end of the day, it's all part of VMware, and there is some financial modeling changes and things like that. And we still have to buy servers. I mean, it's not like we don't have that cost anymore. But the way it's delivered and consumed does change.
So how do you get through cultural resistance to get to a point where you can finally do chargeback?
We are not yet there, but I think even, and I don't see that as a huge issue that we will face. The reason is, over the past few years, VMware IT has deployed several SaaS applications. For example, Salesforce.com or Workday. The business is used to paying for those applications. IT doesn't take the charge. So that definitely culturally, it has changed. I think if I remember a few years ago when we did SFDC implementation, that was the first time we made a business to pay for it. So I don't anticipate a huge cultural issue here. The important thing is, how do you arrive at the detailed cost? How do we collaborate with the internal private cloud team? And again, these are all part of IT. And having a good system to charge back is what we see as an issue rather than a cultural issue here.
But there is another aspect to that too, which is we made a decision a couple of years ago that we were going to really pursue IT as a service, and that was an executive level decision. And Paul, he basically led the organization through transformation. There was a vision, there was a description of why we're making a change, there was a description of how that's going to impact individuals. So there was a leadership effort that was required to take us through a change that is different, frankly, than just virtualizing servers and going from a physical to P2V. Kind of, there's more need to lead the organization through a change than we've seen in the past. So, next question.
Sorry, I was curious as to what technologies you're using in order to be able to give that end-to-end experience. So obviously you're using vCloud, and it sounds like maybe you're using VCAC. You talked about the fact that you're not doing currently chargeback or showback, but I'm wondering how you keep on top of that and what components from the breadth of utilities and stuff that VMware makes, it goes into providing that service.
So before I let Venkat answer, just so FYI, we have a white paper that'll be up on our website this week that takes us through this whole story. It's about 15 pages. It's a pretty good read. It talks about the different components, what they do. So if you go to the VMware.com and search for our IT journey, there's a whole section on IT and how we've transformed, and that white paper is going to be highlighted there.
Okay, excellent.
And go to Wednesday's session, Thermalesh Reddy's session, because he'll go deep into exactly what's in that automation and management layer.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I was wanting to know to follow up with this, because a lot of us have found ourselves right in the middle of huge transformations, and we're trying to break down barriers and get buy-in from every component of the organization, and we have all those challenges. So if you're going to continue to share this, and we can follow that and learn from it, that would be very advantageous and beneficial to all of us. I'm sure we have those. A lot of us find ourselves in the same situation. That's what I really want to do, is maintain contact with you somehow or another, follow your journey so that we can emulate, if you will. It seems like it's been relatively successful. Hopefully in your case study or white paper, you've shared all your lessons learned and pain points and things like that too.
Well, we've shared some of them. I'd be happy to take your card and you know, if you give me feedback on what you're looking for, you know, the next asset we create, we're going to continue to try to.
What I'd really like to have you do is just come to our organization and stand up in front of us and do this all over again to the people that are fighting us internally. Yeah.
We'll talk to your sales rep. We'll, you know, the first 3 that make that request will probably be granted, and then, you know.
Okay, so I'll just stand up here then and exchange information with you. All right, thank you.
Also, I will be at the Meet the Experts launch tomorrow, noon to 1. So I don't know what the sign-up method is, but I'll be in the Meet the Experts launch.
And then Venkat's also leading a general called a group discussion. It's a session that'll be, you know, smaller, more informal. We'll talk about the same topic. And
That's on Wednesday.
Wednesday,
11 o'clock.
That's part of the same operations transformation track. So I think we got, are we done or, okay.
Yeah, folks, we have another class coming in here, so if y'all can
Thank you so much.
hand